Good morning, First Parish in Hingham. I am Jessie Flaherty. I go by she, her. I am the chair of the Worship and Music Committee, and I am so very happy to see everybody here today. Welcome. Welcome to our Zoom worshipers. Hello, everybody. We're glad you're here as well. We encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, say hi to each other, and stick around after the service and hang out with Misty if you want to continue the conversation. Whoever you are, from wherever you have come, regardless of what you believe or who you love, for this next hour you're a part of this community, and we're glad you're here. We encourage you to bring all of who you are into this time and space, all of your identities, all of your hopes, all of your disappointments, and all of your vision for a more inclusive community and just world. We hope you'll find in this time together something to enrich your mind, touch your heart, nurture your spirit, and inspire action. We'd like to welcome any visitors. If you're feeling bold and brave, we invite you to introduce yourself. Would anybody like to say hi today? You are also very, very welcome here. We encourage you to come down to 14 Main Street and join us after the service for our fellowship hour. I invite you today to settle in. Breathe together. May we allow our spirit to be touched by the beauty and the grace, the music and the movement of this morning service.
This is from That Which Abides by Martha Kirby, Capo. Through the week this chalice abides, cupped and silent. Softly it gleams in a dimly lit room, complete unto itself. Today we come together as a community of faith, joyful and free. Our individual energies combine to spark the flame of truth. May we each draw strength for the other, and like the chalice, may we be bathed in the fire of commitment to social justice, equity, and peace.
Opening words today are by Wendy Bartell from Lifting Our Voices. We who dwell on the margins know about divisions, arbitrary and intentional, like land, like class, like culture. We make sharp borders around pieces of ourselves, and we blur the edges by being who we are, by expanding the circle. Beyond binaries, we multiply possibilities, languages, customs, practices, rituals, and ceremonies. Not one narrative, but stories shared. Separation is illusion. Love transgresses borders between you, me, us, them, between secular and sacred. We need trust to strengthen our connection. We must dare to cross from my world into yours, from your world into mine, until we begin to weave a tapestry of faith and wonder aloud, who are we? What is a nation? Who can own the earth?
Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? There were some differing thoughts on whether this is a new hymn or a familiar hymn. So Christopher is going to sing with us for the first few verses, and then he's going to leave us to sing it alone, and I'm confident we can do that. So please rise in body or spirit. Every week we take up an offering, a tangible expression of the abundance that we live with in our homes, in our hearts, in this world. This morning's offering will be given and received.
Where each gender, class, and race risk transforming heart and mind.
With these gifts, may we see a new world into being. I invite us this morning to pause, to quiet our minds and ground our bodies in the floorboards and the pews where our people have found hope, redemption, and joyous affirmation. Bring your attention to your breath and turn your love inward. Connect your heart to the legacy of Old Ship, to all who have passed through these doors seeking life and love. Across centuries and countless generations, through a diversity of people living within the context of their times, we hold infinite stories of humanity's longing. This morning, we are going to gather up the call of this faith and the courage of our convictions to bear witness to the forgotten history of Old Ship's Black and Indigenous ancestors. In this space made sacred by our presence, we commit to listening through the discomfort, listening through judgment that might arise, listening through defenses that are natural, as we speak truth to the painful stories of racism, white supremacy, and injustice. We begin our journey with the reading of the newly adopted Historical and Land Acknowledgements. Janice Phillips, Old Ship's acting president of the Board of Trustees, will come forward and read our new Historical and Land Acknowledgement, which you will find in your order of service.
Good morning, everybody. As a people committed to justice, equity, and interdependence, we pause each week to remember our history. This land was once occupied by the indigenous people whose descendants still live throughout the region and are now known, as the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. We acknowledge that our church continues to benefit from past injustices, including slavery. We remember that history and imagine the world that is possible and will become as we act in solidarity with Indigenous people, Black people, and other people of color for our human liberation.
A few years ago, the Social Justice Council started talking about creating a new land acknowledgement. It was a natural outgrowth of the work we were doing on widening the circle. At some point, the work stalled, but we continued to feel the need to update our land acknowledgement as our understanding grew. The report on slavery at Old Ship was finalized, shedding more light on relevant issues. In the fall, Carrie encouraged us to pick up the work on a land acknowledgement again. I want to tell you about that work. I'll start with the structure of the statement and then explain the process of refining it. As the member of the Social Justice Council who has been most active on the Indigenous Justice Solidarity team at UU Mass Action, I volunteered to write a first draft. Because I have spent time in the last 5 years working with Indigenous people on issues that matter to them, I feel the importance of this work. And sometimes I hear things that make me want to work all the harder. I'd like to share one of those stories. I attended a session at the State House regarding the Indigenous legislative agenda. One of the speakers was an Indigenous leader. I wish I had written down his name, his title, his tribe. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I won't forget what he said. He talked about understanding, by observing legislative processes, that he is less than human. What made him say that? He talked about the many years their coalition has worked to ban Indigenous mascots, to change the state seal and flag, and others. Year after year, these bills are brought forward, debated, lobbied about, but eventually fail to become law. Then, he said, he watched a bill about cage-free housing for egg-laying hens arise and get passed in 1 year. 1 year. That's when he recognized that his well-being was less important to a lot of people than that of a chicken. And you know what? That's not okay with me. So I volunteered to write a first draft of a new land acknowledgement. I believe what we say about our history and the land our meeting house sits on and the people who belonged to this land before we did matters. What we know and what we say about our history matters. I started by wondering what Indigenous people say about what makes a land acknowledgement meaningful to them. And I didn't want to ask an Indigenous person to spend their time and energy educating me about how to write one. I did some internet research and found some resources that made sense and sat well with me. I also did some research about the pre-colonial inhabitants of Hingham. I want to acknowledge that my research has not been thorough and no doubt contains errors. One fact that is clear is that by the time Hingham was settled, the Indigenous population had already been decimated, down to less than 1/5 of what it had been before contact with Europeans. It felt important to find a way to hold those painful truths and to do more than recite them, but to respond to them in some meaningful way. It was clear to me that the starting point was grounded in our Unitarian Universalist values. And that's why our acknowledgement starts by declaring that we are a people committed to justice, equity, and interdependence. The research I did led me to the conclusion that the most frequent Indigenous occupants of this land pre-contact were the Neponset Band of the Massachusetts. And according to colonial records, it was the Massachusetts Chief Sachem who transferred over 30 square miles to the leaders of the settlement known as Hingham. The descendants of that tribe are now known as the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog, according to their website. We name them and make the important declaration that their descendants still live throughout this region. One of the harms done to Indigenous people has been to create the mistaken belief that they were all killed off, that they no longer exist. We reject that untruth. We then go on to remind ourselves that although we were not the originators of these injustices, we still bear responsibility, because the fact is that we continue to benefit from them and from systems of oppression. Daveline will tell us more about these benefits. This is part of our statement because we need to be honest with ourselves that it's not just a problem from the past that isn't really relevant anymore. Finally, it is crucial to not simply say some high-minded and well-crafted words about truth and justice, but to actually do something about injustice. And it's important for us to recognize that we too lose when others are disadvantaged. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, no one is free until we are all free. Creating change in systems of oppression does not only benefit others, it benefits us as well. So we end with the opportunity to imagine the world we can create when we act in solidarity with those who have been marginalized. Those basic parts were there in my first draft, but now I want to say a bit about how the statement came to be what it is today. I first brought my proposed draft to the Social Justice Council. I wish I could link each person to their recommendations, but I can't. All I can tell you is that we all worked together to create a new and improved statement. Several members of the Social Justice Council brought it to a board meeting for discussion. The board generously spent their time working with us. They brought to our attention that we had moved beyond a land acknowledgement to a land and historical acknowledgement. Together, that is, members of the Social Justice Council and the board created the final draft you've heard today. The board ratified it, excuse me, as well as a policy that it shall be read at all public meetings held in the meeting house. Many minds and hearts engaged in the effort to craft a statement that better reflects our understanding today.
Good morning. When we first began focusing on anti-racism justice work here at Old Ship, my thought was that we would learn more about creating a just world, a more racially diverse and multicultural world. As our work continued, however, I came to realize the extent to which white supremacy culture impacts virtually all aspects of our culture, and the extent to which those of us who are white receive advantages that are not received by people of color or Indigenous people. And yet, when we began our work on this acknowledgement, I never gave a thought to how much this community, this congregation, had received advantages that arose from our history with Indigenous and enslaved people, from the injustices our ancestors participated in and that we benefit from. My focus was for us to learn the whole of our history and be honest about it, not to erase it, not to ignore it, but as we begin to focus on what is now the historical and land acknowledgement, I learned the extent to which we today benefit from this uncomfortable history. Before I share these reflections, I want to state it's hard and confusing to do research about much of our Old Ship history. We have a long, long history, and we have a lot of records and accounts that are sometimes incomplete, sometimes inaccurate, and as I remind myself, were written by the dominant culture, which often excluded or erased the people we are talking about today. In making these reflections, I've conducted research. I've watched more than a few Hingham Historical Society lectures, and I have to thank Eileen for some of those. And I've engaged in some online research. I think my information is correct, but we continue to learn more about our history. So it's possible we will learn things that make what I say today incorrect. Additionally, I at times have made assumptions based on the facts we have discovered. I think these assumptions are reasonable ones. And before I begin, it's also important to note that Massachusetts legalized slavery in 1647. It was the first New England colony to do so. I think we're often surprised by that fact. And I should also say we also were the first state, if you will, in New England to abolish slavery. Thanks actually to John Adams. And the initial enslaved people were indigenous people, followed by Black people. So to begin, how do we benefit from the past injustices related to slavery and the treatment of indigenous people? Most importantly, we have inherited this building and this land where we worship. Many of us in Hingham perpetuate what I call a myth about how we came to own property in Hingham. We maintained that in 1665, the Massachusetts indigenous people granted the land, quote, from the beginning of the world, unquote, to the Hingham settlers. This deed, bearing the mark of Chief Sachem Josiah Wampatuck, hangs in Hingham Town Hall. Our ancestors took possession of these lands. The idea of deeding land to anyone is inconsistent with Native American concepts of land ownership. For Native Americans, the land could not be owned. It could only be stewarded and lived with. Ownership of land, especially private ownership, was inconsistent with this view. It was, however, consistent with the European view and with the view of the doctrine of discovery. I would say that early Hingham settlers took the land that were possessed by original Native peoples. However, by virtue of that above referenced deed, Josiah Wampatuck sold the land, the township of Hingham, to Captain Joshua Hobart. That name might ring a bell. He was the brother of our first minister, Peter Hobart, and Ensign John Thaxter, representatives of Hingham's colonial residents. Having occupied the land for 30 years, many historical sources cite that the English presumably felt entitled to a steep discount on the price of the land. The sum promised to Josiah Wampatuck is the land encompassing most of Hingham, and it was to be paid by 2 Hingham landowners. With that payment, the matter was considered settled. How did the meeting house come to be built on this land? When the parish voted to build a new meeting house, there was a lot of debate, apparently at town meeting, characterized as a violent contest in regard to the placement of the meeting house in which the interference of the general court was required. Before the matter was settled, however, the owner of this parcel of land, which we now own, was donated to the parish. Who donated it? Captain Joshua Hobart. As owners and stewards of this land today, we benefit from our ancestors' dispossession of this land from indigenous people. I always claim it's dispossession and not taking ownership, because if you don't imagine that you own something, it really can't be taken or stolen from you, but it can be dispossessed. So what about the meeting house itself? The building of the meeting house was financed by an assessment of all adults in town based on ability to pay. The total assessment to build the meeting house was £437. I tried really hard to discover what that was in today's dollars, but the records don't go back that far when you try to explain it, so I failed. The Hingham Historical Society has documented the role that slavery and the triangular trade played in creating wealth in Hingham. Hingham had lumber, fish, and shipbuilding industries at that time. Some of the most important members of Hingham at that time enslaved people. These are names we recognize today: Levitt, Cushing, Hersey, and Thaxter, for example. I think they're all streets. And of course, as we shared in our report last year, Reverend Ebenezer Gay from here, as well as Reverend Daniel Shute from Second Parish, enslaved people. Hingham and New England generally both enslaved people and benefited economically from the slave trade. Enslaved people of color contributed in many ways to their communities. And in Hingham, they farmed, cared for children and adults, maintained homes and livestock, constructed ships and buildings, and worked at skilled and unskilled trades. All of this work generally done for the benefit of others. Their labor was a significant factor in creating the wealth and the building of the Hingham economy. Hingham Historical Society lecturer Wayne Erkerson reported that Hingham had a higher percentage of enslaved people, 3% more, than most New England towns in 1764. This was likely, he concluded, a reflection of the general wealth of the town residents. We assume that the expansion of this meeting house in 1731 and 1755 were funded, at least in part, by the wealth created from the labors of enslaved people, if not by the activity of enslaved people themselves. As an example of how Old Ship benefited from enslaved people, we can look at the 1776 colonial census. And this work comes from Hingham Historical Society member Paula Bagger. Of the 385 families living in Hingham, there were 28 white Hingham households with black household members. Of these 28 families, 22 of them were members of this parish. They were also among the most wealthy and most highly educated families in Hingham. Given the contributions of enslaved people to the creation of wealth in our community, our Old Ship community, the land and the meeting house itself are a benefit we receive today from our unjust history. There are most likely other ways in which we have benefited from these past injustices that led to more wealth than we might have otherwise had. But the meeting house and the land on which it sits are the clearest examples. And think about how much we cherish, honor, and talk about this building, this land. It should be noted that the assessed value, according to the Hingham Assessor's Office, of this property today is just under $1.9 million. This is a clear benefit to our community today. Some of the important work of the Social Justice Council and of this congregation is to determine how we best use these benefits to create a more just and fairer world for all people. Thank you.
I invite us to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 114, Forward Through the Ages.
Good morning. I was pleased to be asked to work on a report that would tie more specific information about people who were owned by members of First Parish Church in a manner that is considered slavery. There were several sources of information. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous up here. Carol Valentine also contributed to this report. There were several sources of information, but in all of them, much less attention is paid to Black and Indigenous individuals than to other people of the time. In many cases, in records from the 17th century and 18th century, there are very few records of some of the basic facts about their lives. Despite these challenges, the Hingham Historical Society, and as David Lee mentioned, one of the prime individuals involved is Paula Baggert, who was formerly, I believe, a president of the Historical Society, has done extensive research on Black and Indigenous people in Hingham from its founding through the early 1780s, the time when slavery was officially outlawed in Massachusetts. Their goal was to identify as many individuals as possible and to learn whatever could be determined about their lives. They used assessments of property for taxes, records of estates, wills, accounts, letters, and town records. Records were also kept by Reverend Ebenezer Gay, the third minister of First Parish, who listed births, deaths, and other important life events separately for those he called Negroes and Indians connected with the congregation during his tenure from 1717 to 1787. These documents refer to some people by name, but many times there is only a general description with no name, maybe an approximate age, and even gender may not be given, with a great part of the personal identity of these people lost to the passage of time. The information obtained by the Historical Society and Reverend Gay's lists of births and deaths very often refers to the names of the Hingham settlers that people of color belonged to. We know that some Black and Indigenous people were classified as servants, but in wills, it is clear that they were commonly considered property who were passed down from one generation of Hingham families to the next. There's one quote, which I'm not going to be able to remember the exact wording of it, from a Hingham household, person, the man of the house, I guess you would say, who left the offspring of his Black people to his wife and all of their children to be his families basically forever. So those are the kinds of things that you read about, and of course they're very disturbing and also very real as far as what actually happened during those times. The 1698 laws of the province of Massachusetts Bay, which Hingham was part of at that time, contain a curfew, a prohibition on congregating without permission, and fines and punishment for running away that applied to both free and enslaved people of color of the time. The work by the Historical Society was very comprehensive and attempted to resolve some discrepancies in Reverend Gay's records and between his records and other accounts of the time. But that information included all of Hingham. By the mid-1700s, Hingham included both a second parish and a third parish in addition to the first. Lists of the other church's members and town genealogies were used to clarify which people of color lived in the homes of the parishioners of the First Parish congregation only. From this work, it appears that the number of Black and Indigenous people held by First Parish members from 1681 through the early 1780s, was approximately 75. This included about 18 children and 10 Indigenous people of all ages. This does not include individuals who were known to have been able to buy or earn their freedom. In 1681, our ancestors who were Black and Indigenous would have sat where our choir sits today. This morning, we pause to recognize people enslaved and indentured by members of Old Ship. We begin with silence. In this silence, we place a bouquet of flowers to remember the people of Old Ship who were enslaved by members of Old Ship. We place a bouquet of flowers to remember the children who were enslaved by members of Old Ship. We place a bouquet of flowers to remember the Indigenous people who were enslaved by members of Old Ship. We place a bouquet of flowers to remember all people who had to buy or earn their way to freedom. For 335 years, the Meeting House has called people to worship and to town meetings. This morning, we ring the bell in recognition of Indigenous people, Black people, and other people of color who were gathered by its sound. On the altar of life and love, we light a candle of commitment to truth-telling, accountability, repair, and solidarity.
Spirit of life and love and all that is holy, we gather with heavy hearts, acknowledging the painful history of First Parish in Hingham. We know we are shaped by a legacy that continues to influence our world today. Grant us the courage to tell the truth of pain and prejudice, of complicity, supremacy, and injustice, of harm done and people dehumanized. Transform our remorse into responsibility, our privilege into accountability, our apologies into action, and our complacency into faithful resistance. Sustained by the grace of love, guided by Unitarian Universalist values, may we be committed to action, advocacy, and solidarity. As Dave Aline whispered beside me, amen. Amen. Thank you, Christopher. Show us how to love. It's a huge call, right? After this service. Last week, I closed our service on witnessing vitality with room to grow by naming that, yes, we need pledges. Yes, we need participants and leaders. Yes, we need partnerships. But the deepest life of Old Ship is found in relationships. Relationships that are rooted in love, shaped by our covenant, guided by our you values, and sustained by grace. Relationships. The same is true when it comes to our justice work. Yes, we need share the plate. Yes, we need meals served. Yes, we need racism study. Yes, we need rallies. And our deepest relationships, the deepest life of Old Ship, will be found in our relationships outside the pews, outside the meeting house, outside of Hingham. And so how do we do that? How do we take this story of Old Ship's history, step into accountability, and arrive into the world ready for action, advocacy, and solidarity? I turn to one of my teachers, Brian Stevenson. Some of you might know him. Some of you might have read about him. Some of you might have seen his movie about his book, Just Mercy. Some of you may have been to his legacy museums in Birmingham, Alabama. But the thing about Brian Stevenson that is quick and real is he tells us we need to get proximate. Get proximate. He urges us to be people, to get proximate to people who are marginalized and excluded. He urges us to get physically close to the poor, the marginalized, the excluded, and the incarcerated, to truly understand, to empathize, and to solve systemic systems of injustice and supremacy. Proximity is the way in which we deepen our understanding, we reveal the critical details of what's going on, and it empowers us to effective advocacy. Rather than working from a distance, from our privileged positions, from our spaces of comfort, Brian Stevens calls us to get proximate. In Ellie's story this morning of her experience at the State House, she demonstrated what it means to get proximate, to show up where we can make a difference, but where, not just where we can make a difference, but where we grow in understanding what is really at stake here. Ellie's advocacy changed for her what is at stake here. The Indigenous person she witnessed understood his life to be less important than that of a chicken. Now, this task of getting proximate is not comfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. And we're going to make mistakes. I love that Ellie and Daveline talked about, we did this research, but we may be wrong. And when new information comes, we may revise what we've said or evolve in how we do this work. But it should not stop us. Our need for imperfection, our need to get it right, our fear that we might do something wrong should not stop us from showing up, from getting proximate. I remember the first time I showed up for legislative advocacy in Maine regarding a bill that was about Indigenous sovereignty. I got up to testify along with a long list of other people testifying for the sovereignty of the Wabanaki people. I got up and testified and I sat down. And then one of the Indigenous women stood up, one of the Penobscot women stood up, and she said, "Before I address all of you, I want to address her." And she pointed to me. She corrected my testimony. My immediate response was to want to run and hide. My immediate response was wanting to say, yeah, but, my immediate response was to do defensiveness. But once I quieted all that discomfort and fear and shame around imperfection, I did humility. I did humility, and in my heart found room to say, thank you for expanding what I know. I know more now because I showed up and was willing to make a mistake and live in that place of fear and engage in that place of discomfort. And so the invitation today is, let's get uncomfortable. Let's get uncomfortable and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Let's make mistakes and learning how to be humble and keep going forward in the work that is ours to do. This afternoon, over at the UU, Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, there is the immigrant experience at 4:00. The UU Urban Ministry is a great place for us to show up, us to get outside of Hingham and head over to Roxbury. Be part of the urban ministry that is engaging in cross-cultural dialogue. In 2 weeks, there is an event called Bridges of Understanding. It is about dialogue, reflection, and community responsibility. Daveline will be one of the panel presenters and conveners for that event in her work with the urban ministry. It is another opportunity for us to get out of our seats, get out of our pews, get outside of this meeting house, and go figure out how is it that we are going to hold this privilege and be accountable to this story that we have inherited. The third action that is possible is UU Mass Action Advocacy Days coming up in April. A great opportunity to become advocates for issues we all care about. Indigenous sovereignty and justice, immigration. What are the other issues, Ellie and Nancy? You two are embedded in this work. Just holler them out if you can. I'm putting you on the spot to remember along with me. That's all right, I can't remember, so you don't need to either. But there are 3 opportunities right now, in this place, in this time, for us to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Us taking a step to do things right while we do things wrong. Letting ourselves be called out when we need to be corrected. This is the work of Unitarian Universalism. This is the work of our time. This is what it means to be privileged. Yes, we need share the plate. Yes, we need meals prepared. Yes, we need racism study. Yes, we need rallies. And the deepest life of Old Ship will be found in relationship. Will be found in relationship. Let's get proximate, my friends. Let's get proximate. So maybe. Amen. Let us rise and bring this energy. I don't know if you have this heavy energy on your heart still. I do. It's like, I noticed my heart meter was going here a few seconds ago, along with Laura's and everybody else here who has taken the courage to speak truth this morning, to bring forward flowers to represent the people, our ancestors, mind you, our Unitarian Universalist ancestors who were enslaved, children and indigenous, and those that had to earn their freedom. Let us stand up and sing together, Guide My Feet, number 348, and let us mean it. Let us mean it.
Guide
Please be seated. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us and offer as gifts unto the world.
We extinguish this chalice as we walk holding the story of our ancestors with accountability, with love, with action in the world to be change makers as we get proximate.
Wow.
This week, the newsletter comes out. I invite you to look for my article. I'm going to give you more information about advocacy days and about the dialogue at the Unitarian Universalist urban ministry. And I'm going to tell you the story of my friend Benny, a monk, who was dehooded on Thursday. He's one of my heroes who knows how to get proximate. Look for the newsletter on Tuesday to hear Benny's story and find ways in which you can get proximate. Go in peace, go in love. Take what you find here with you out into the world. Join the board down at the meeting house for conversations about the financial future of this congregation as we engage in pledge drive, as we prepare for a new building. Then come back next Sunday. Christopher will be here with my colleague Jenny Mulqueen to lead you in a service about the tools of paying attention. Let us be together in this world, advocates for action and advocacy.